Hello, today is Thursday, April 9th, April 10th, 2025. Yesterday, I bought a Korean lottery ticket, 5 games. Each game is 1,000 won, so 5 games is 5,000 won. That's roughly about $4 or $3.8, but I lost the ticket somewhere. So someone who found it, I blessed him or her, and I wish them to have some good results. But out of curiosity and out of determination not to lose any ticket, any money, any stuff in the future, I bought 10 games. That's 10,000 won worth, about $8 worth, last night, right after I went back home, right? So hopefully my tickets win the first prize and I get compensated, and let's see if that's the truth. I feel that this year or early part of this year I will win big. I'm not sure if it's a Korean lottery or it's just the overseas ticket, overseas raffle ticket, or some kind of a pension compensation program. I will win big. That's true with the among the countries, right? You need to win big. You sometimes lose, sometimes you win. That's the trade, international trade. But we are seeing tariffs war coming out of Trump, the USA, and the biggest loser is China, and also we are also losing some battle in the trade negotiation too. So our Korean delegates will be in the U.S. soon and negotiate the terms. So let's find out what the Time has to say about the tariffs war. This article is from Time, and the title is Economists Say America's Trade Deficits, which Trump seeks to close with the tariffs, are a sign of dominance, not weakness. By Paul Wiseman. Washington. By declaring a trade war on the rest of the world, President Donald Trump has panicked global financial markets, raised the risk of recession, and broken the political and economic alliances that made much of the world stable for business after World War II. Trump's latest round of tariffs went into full effect at midnight Wednesday, with higher import tax rates on dozens of countries and territories taking hold. Economists are puzzled to see Trump trying to overhaul the existing economic order and doing it so soon after inheriting the strongest economy in the world. Many of their trading partners he accuses of ripping off U.S. businesses and workers were already floundering, taking hold. There is a deep irony in Trump claiming unfair treatment of the American economy at a time when it was growing robustly while every other major economy had stalled or was losing growth momentum, said Ezra Prasad, professor of trade policy at Cornell University. In an even greater irony, the Trump tariffs are likely to end America's remarkable run of success and crash the economy, job growth, and financial markets. Trump and his trade advisors insist that the rules governing global commerce put the United States at a distinct disadvantage. But mainstream economists, whose views Trump and his advisors disdain, disdain, right? Disdain, say the president has a warped idea of world trade, especially a preoccupation with trade deficits, which they say do nothing to impede growth. Here, disdain. Where is it? Warped idea. Global commerce put the United States at a distant disadvantage, right? Disdain. Where is it? Okay, I'll just skip it. The administration accuses other countries of erecting unfair trade barriers to keep out American exports and using underhanded tactics to promote their own. In Trump's telling, his tariffs are a long overdue reckoning, right? Long overdue reckoning. That's good expression though, right? Here. Long overdue, his tariffs are a long overdue reckoning. The U.S. is the victim of an economic mugging by Europe, China, Mexico, Japan, and even Canada. Wow, economic mugging. U.S. is the victim of an economic mugging by Europe, China, Mexico, Japan, and even Canada. It's true that some countries charge higher taxes on imports than the United States does. Some manipulate their currencies lower to ensure that their goods are price competitive in international markets. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge, right? Some countries lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. Some countries lavish their industries with a subsidy to give them an edge. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. That's good expression, man. However, the United States is still the second largest exporter in the world. After China, the U.S. exported $3.1 trillion of goods and services in 2023, far ahead of third place Germany at $2 trillion. Right, far ahead of third place. Yeah, far ahead of. Yeah, here. Far ahead of third place. Far ahead of third place Germany. Far ahead of third place Germany. The fear that Trump's remedies are long overdue reckoning, right? Long overdue reckoning. The fear that Trump's remedies are deadlier than the maladies he is trying to cure has sent investors fleeing American stocks. Since Trump announced sweeping import taxes on April 2nd, the S&P 500 has cratered 12%. Yeah, cratered, right? Cratered. When a meteorite hits the Earth, it creates crater, right? Like bombarded and taken out. The Earth are taken out. So let's find out. Cratered. I will just go for free dictionary, this.com. This time. The bowl-shaped depression created by the activity of a volcano or geyser, verb, to make craters in. Missiles did not crater the airfield. Tom Clancy, the famous author. To form a crater or crater, slang. To fall and crash violently from a great height. Crater, to fall utterly. Talked about how tough times were in Texas since the oil business cratered. Fall utterly. fall and crash violently from a great height. Right. We see a lot of videos on YouTube that they conduct amateurs conduct a crater test by dropping stones, snowballs, balloons, and so on. So there was cratered, right? Cratered. The fear that Trump's remedies are deadlier than the maladies he is trying to cure has sent investors fleeing American stocks. Since Trump announced sweeping import taxes on April 2nd, the S&P 500 has cratered 12%. A lot of good expression. The S&P 500 has cratered 12%. Melodies, right? Melodies. Despite the high trade deficits, the U.S. economy is strong. Trump and his advisors point to America's lopsided trade numbers, year after year of huge deficits, as proof of foreigners' perfidy, right? Perfidy, foreigners' perfidy. Perjury, like a perjury, right? Shenanigan, perfidy. I'll look up the word later, but I'll just mark it, highlight it so that I could memorize it later. He is seeking to restore justice and billions of long-gone U.S. factory jobs by taxing imports at rates not seen in America since the days of the horse and buggy. Long gone, right? Long gone U.S. factory jobs they have taken so much of our wealth away from us. The president declared last week at a White House Rose Garden ceremony to celebrate the tariffs announcement. We are not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. That's a good term, but mistake. But the U.S. is already the wealthiest major economy in the world. And the International Monetary Fund in January forecast that the United States would outgrow every other major advanced economy this year. China and India did grow faster than the United States over the past decade, but their living standards still don't come close to those in the U.S. Manufacturing in the U.S. has been fading for decades. There is widespread agreement that many American manufacturers couldn't compete with an influx of cheap imports after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. That's good expression. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. Four years later, nearly 3 million manufacturing jobs had been lost, though robots and other forms of automation probably did at least as much to reduce factory jobs as the China shock. Tariffs are Trump's all-purpose weapon. To turn around this long decline, Trump has repeatedly unsheathed the tariffs that are his weapon of choice. Since returning to the White House in January, he's plastered 25% taxes on foreign cars, steel, and aluminum. He's hit Chinese imports with 20% levies, on top of hefty tariffs he imposed on China during his first term. On April 2nd, he blasted his big bazooka, 10% baseline tariffs on just about everybody and reciprocal tariffs on everyone else that Trump team identified as bad actors, including tiny Lesotho 50% import tax, and China 34% before adding earlier levies. Right? Trump views the tariffs as an all-purpose economic fix that will protect American industries, encourage companies to open factories in America, raise money for the U.S. Treasury, and give him leverage to bend other countries to his will, even on issues that have nothing to do with trade, such as drug trafficking and immigration. So Trump views tariffs as an all-purpose fix, economic fix that will protect American industries, encourage companies to open factories in America, raise money for the U.S. industry, and give him leverage to bend other countries to his will. Right? Trump views tariffs as an all-purpose economic fix that will protect American industries, encourage companies to open factories in America, raise money for the U.S. industry, Treasury, and give him leverage to bend others to his will, to other countries to his will, even on issues that have nothing to do with trade, such as drug trafficking and immigration. Trump views tariffs as an all-purpose economic fix that will raise U.S. Treasury, fund, allow him bend other countries to his will, and also factories that will protect American jobs, industries, encourage companies to open factories in America, raise money for the U.S. Treasury, and give him leverage to bend other companies to his will. The president also sees a smoking gun. The United States has bought more from other countries than it has sold them every year for the past half century. In 2024, the U.S. trade deficit in goods and services came to a whopping $918 billion, the second highest amount on record. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro calls America's trade deficits the sum of all cheating by other countries. Damn, sum of all cheating. Damn. Sum of all cheating by other countries. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro calls America's trade deficits the sum of all cheating by other countries. Trade deficits calls America's trade deficits the sum of all cheating by other countries. However, economists say trade deficits aren't a sign of national weakness. The U.S. economy has nearly quadrupled in size, adjusted for inflation, during that half-century of trade deficits. There's no reason to think that a bigger trade deficit means lower growth, said former IMF chief economist Maurice Obstfeld, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute of International Economics and economist at the University of California, Berkeley. In fact, the opposite is closer to the truth in many countries. A trade deficit, Obstfeld said, does not mean a country is losing through trade or being ripped off. Spend a lot, save a little, and see trade deficits swell. The faster the U.S. economy grows, in fact, the more imports Americans tend to buy and the wider the trade deficit tends to get. The U.S. trade deficit, the gap between what it sells and what it buys from foreign countries, hit a record $945 billion in 2020 as the American economy roared back from COVID-19 lockdowns. Trade deficits typically fall sharply in recessions. Nor are trade deficits primarily inflicted on America by other countries' unfair trading practices. To economists, they are a homegrown product, the result of Americans' propensity to save little and consume more than they produce. American shoppers' famous appetite for spending more than the country makes means that a chunk of spending is used for imports. If the United States boosted its saving, for example, by reducing its budget deficits, then that would reduce its trade deficit as well, economists say. It's not like the rest of the world has been ripping us off for decades, said Jay Bryson, chief economist at Wells Fargo. It's because we don't save enough. The flip side of America's long savings and big trade deficits is a steady inflow of foreign investment as other countries sink their export earnings into the United States. Oh, that's good, right? Sink their export earnings into United States. I'll just remember that. Sink their export earnings into the United States. Good insight, right? Direct investment into the U.S. came to $349 billion in 2023. The World Bank reported nearly double number two Singapore's inflows. Nearly double number two Singapore's inflows. The only scenario in which tariffs reduce the U.S. deficit is if they cause investment in the United States to crash, said Barry Eichengreen, an economist at the University of California, Berkeley. That would be a disaster. The only scenario in which tariffs reduce the U.S. deficit is if they cause investment in the U.S. to crash, said Barry Eichengreen, an economist at the University of California. That would be a disaster. So increased tariffs will reduce the foreign investors sinking their export earnings into the U.S. economy, and it will crash the U.S. economy. Then it will reduce U.S. deficit definitely, but there would be a disaster. Harvard University economist Donnie Roderick said, a well-designed industrial policy supported by select tariffs might have fostered increased investment and capacity in manufacturing. Well-designed industrial policy supported by select tariffs, right? Select companies. Instead, Rodnick said Trump's actions just throw up a lot of uncertainty and alienate America's terrible policy all in all. So there's many negative concerns about the, Trump raising tariffs, so that he views his tariffs as an all-purpose economic fix that will uh, have factory jobs returned, uh, increase foreign investments, and allow him, give him a leverage to bend other countries to his will. But that's not the case, right? Uh, Singapore's many inflows, foreign countries, after earning a lot of export monies, tend to sink into the U.S. economy, giving them steady inflow of foreign investments. Before I close the article, I would like to remember the expressions that I decided to remember. Crater, right? U.S. economy cratered. Concerns sink. What else? Disdain, right? Flounder. Terrible U.S. economy. So luckily I saved the screenshots. So let's go back. Sink their export earnings into the United States. Sink their export earnings into the United States. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro calls America's trade deficits the sum of all cheating by other countries. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro calls America's trade deficits the sum of all cheating by other countries. Funny expressions. Trump views tariffs as an all-purpose economic fix that will protect American industries, encourage companies to open factories in America, raise money for the U.S. Treasury. That's a good expression, though. Raise money for the U.S. Treasury and give him leverage to bend other countries to his will. Bend other countries to his will. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. The factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. Heartland communities withered. Factories closed, workers were laid off, and heartland communities withered. As proof of foreigners' perfidy, long gone U.S. factory jobs, 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 perfidy. Let's find the exact pronunciation and meaning of perfidy. It's been a long while. Like a perfidy. I will go to dictionary.com this time. Perfidious, right? Perfidy. Perfidy. Deliberate breach of faith or trust. Faithlessness, treachery, perfidy that goes unpunished. An act of instance of faithlessness or treachery, perfidy. Perjury is different, right? You just fix your documents. Perjury or perfidy, treachery. So is not a good word, I think. Perfidy. As a proof of foreigners' perfidy, Trump and his advisor point to America's lopsided trade numbers year after year of huge deficits as proof of foreigners' perfidy. Lopsided trade numbers. Right? Lopsided. Your ears are lopsided. Lopsided trade numbers. Unmatched. Strangely unmatched. As proof of foreigners' perfidy, long gone U.S. factory jobs, lopsided trade numbers. Lopsided trade numbers. As proof, foreigners' poverty, the melodies. The S&P 500 has cratered 12%. The S&P 500 has cratered 12%. The S&P 500 cratered 12%. Far ahead of third place Germany at $2 trillion. Far ahead of third place Germany at $2 trillion. Far ahead of third place Germany at 2%. Far ahead of. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. Not edges. Some governments lavish their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. His tariffs are long overdue reckoning. His tariffs are a long overdue reckoning. The U.S. is the victim of an economic mugging by Europe, China, Mexico, Japan, even Canada. His tariffs are a long overdue reckoning. The U.S. is the victim of economic mugging by Europe and China, right? His tariffs are long overdue reckoning. The U.S. is a victim of an economic mugging by Europe, China, Mexico, and Japan, and even Canada. Long overdue reckoning. A warped idea. Well, that's it. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful Time Thursday. I like Time. I wish you like the magazine Time too. Time is a very good, reliable source for political, economic, and all-purpose genre, and also it will give you an edge when it comes to learning English. It gives you in-depth analysis, insight, and a lot of good vocabulary such as perfidy, melody, crater, lavish, and so on. Thanks for listening, and don't have a warped idea. Bye-bye.